All right. Thanks everyone for joining me on the High Ground podcast, which is what I've chosen to name it.
Cute.
Not only for obvious reasons, but I really think that we should focus on bringing a positive light to Star Wars. I think our community is kind of dripping with negativity a lot, so we're going to take the high ground and we're going to support everyone as much as we can. I am Brandon, also known as Darth Choco or Darth Chocolate, depending on where you find me. But I'm all over, and I figure let's go clockwise. We'll start with Shaylee. If you can introduce yourself and how you got into Star Wars, and yeah, just introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Shaylo Wren on TikTok, but that is the only Star Wars related thing you can find me on, so I don't have to give multiple things. But I was introduced to Star Wars from the time I popped into existence from my dad. He ever since I was like tiny, we would play Jedi Power Battles on the Dreamcast.
I love that game so much.
It's so good. I love that game. It's so good. I would come home every day and be like, Dad, can we play the game? So, and then I would watch The Phantom Menace over and over, and I would be like, this is the coolest thing in existence. I really thought it was the coolest thing. And then, yeah, so I grew up on the prequels and the originals, and I try to make sure it's not my only personality trait, but sometimes it seems that way. But yeah, and then been loving it ever since.
Legit, that game is why I love Plo Koon so much, and it's why my favorite lightsaber color is yellow.
Yes, I love playing Plo.
Oh man, no, it was just so good. Especially the feed level where you're running through and there's rocket launchers and stuff. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
All about that game.
So nostalgic. It's so nostalgic. And then like I would love where you could go into like the practice. I don't remember, it was like a training arena or something, and like you could play like the droids too. Yeah. Oh, I love that game. I still have my Dreamcast. It still works. I need to play it again.
I'm thinking of in the future like going on Twitch and literally just myself playing through all of the Star Wars games.
That'd be so fun.
There's been some really terrible ones, but a lot of amazing
They're fun to laugh at.
Yeah. All right, and then we'll keep going with the clockwise. Travis, have you introduced yourself?
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, my name's Travis, good friend of Brandon's. You may recognize me from one or two of his podcasts prior. What can I say? Star Wars is like, my first meal of the day, probably. I don't have breakfast. I just have like Attack of the Clones.
Vader O's. We need to make a Star Wars cereal.
Yeah, Boba Fett is he's like my blankie. No, I actually own a lot of Star Wars shirts. A lot of people will be. It's like the first thing they see. They're like, "Oh, that guy likes Star Wars," and I like that because it helps you identify other Star Wars fans and you have cool conversations. So I tend to wear a lot of Star Wars shirts. But anyway, what can I say? Like Star Wars is creatively a very big inspiration to me. I'm a musician and an artist, and a lot of I don't necessarily make Star Wars art all the time or music ever, but it's kind of like the same thing that drives Star Wars is the depth and the emotion, and yet the adventure and the humor. I think all are facets of it that I like to include in whatever I'm doing.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'll stop there.
Speaking of which, I legit have an acoustic song that is titled "The Boys in White," and it's about the life of a clone trooper. I'm thinking about debuting it somewhere. Haven't figured out quite yet. But, yeah. And then
I'll help you with it if you need any.
Last but certainly not least, we have JKev. Let's talk about it.
Appreciate you inviting me back again. I got into Star Wars. I'm pretty sure that I was at the drive-in theater at 6 months old when A New Hope came out. It was just called Star Wars in 1977. But I don't remember that part. I do remember going to see Empire at probably the same drive-in when I was almost 4 years old. So that it's just been a part of my life ever since. There was a cereal called C3POs for a while from Kellogg's, and I'm pretty sure I ate quite a bit of that when it was out. Yeah, Yoda kind of freaked me out, but he still does, especially Rebels Yoda and original Yoda. But yeah, it's something that's just been a fun part of my own just childhood and now adulthood. It's something I share with my friends, and we've debated things like how could there be, pew pew and vroom sounds out in space in the vacuum. So we came up with like these physics explanations of how the Death Star maybe has enough density, it has a small atmosphere, just stupid nerdy stuff like that. So it's so fun to see people younger than me, like all of you, be enjoying Star Wars and them still making Star Wars content. And I'm just, I love it.
Yeah. Oh man, I love so much that George Lucas was a genius how he structured things where each generation gets a new Star Wars. And although, yes, that makes it primed for hate from the previous generation, it's still really good. And we all eventually catch up,
Yeah, this is my third round of trilogies defending them. So yeah.
A war vet.
Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. I'm this guy on the island, just kind of old and yeah.
But wise.
Well, yeah, to go and get started with our little what if, this is kind of a loose experiment and hopefully it works out. But someone had posted a what if question to multiple of us creators. And that's kind of what spawned this. The question was, what if Anakin had defeated Obi-Wan instead of the other way around, Mustafar? And so, my answer, Dane Wood actually got the question first and actually stole what I would have said. So I had another answer that I thought might have been, that was just a little bit different, and I was thinking about it and I thought, well, let's say, so Anakin survived, right? Now, yes, he did kill a lot of Jedi just before this, but I think him fighting and defeating his friend really might have pulled him out of that rage, right? Might have dropped him into sadness, and he devastated. I can imagine him walking back to the ship and seeing Padme lying there. And he would have got her to some medical attention real quick. And whether or not we haven't had it confirmed that it was actually Palpatine siphoning off Padme's life force. It hasn't been confirmed. I like that theory, but she also could be dying because literally, like, the love of her life turned out to be a mass murderer, and the whole government that she spent all of her life protecting became a dictatorship. Like, she lost everything in one fell swoop. So whether or not those are the reasons, if Anakin was the one that saved her, I think she would have found the will to live, and she wouldn't have needed to siphon off her life force. And her being so strong-willed, there's no way she would have sat there and hung around in the Empire. So I could picture them running off to some corner of the galaxy, maybe even Tatooine, and trying to make a life with each other there and raising their two kids. And I don't think Anakin would have remained on the dark side in that scenario, and he would have raised them probably a little bit more balanced than the Jedi were back then. But ultimately, they would see the need for them to stand up to the Emperor. And so I picture all three of them trying to face the Emperor together. And whether or not that works, that's a whole different story. We can write that. But that was my what if scenario that kind of sparked all this. Now, our order kind of changed because Travis dropped out, but I don't know. Any thoughts on that scenario, Travis?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be an interesting thing to see.
You can also tell me if I'm just flat out wrong and stupid, and just redo it. That's cool. This is a super free form.
But we want you to invite us back.
I don't think you could be wrong. You know, it's your imagination. But as far as what I think would happen, and that's if you're saying if Padme and Anakin had just gone off.
Basically, if Anakin beat Obi-Wan instead of the other way around, that's the only thing that's different.
Yeah, I find it a little bit hard to believe that Padme could like go anywhere and forgive him for what he had already done at that point, killing the younglings.
Didn't even think about that.
No visitation for you, right? That's what she'd say.
I mean, unless he used some sort of dark side, hypnotism on her or something. But I guess, yeah. I mean, that right there kind of stops it for me. But if she did go along with it, then I mean, it'd be a little bit romantic and nice that they could have a family or whatever. But there would just be a little bit of darkness there that I think would probably resurface at some point.
Okay, that's cool. I like that a lot, actually. Shaylee, your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like if Padme could have pulled him out of it, it would have to be before he killed Obi-Wan. I feel like him killing his brother would push him too far to the dark side, because like it would make more, like, she tried to pull him back like already, like before that. So if she couldn't do it before he killed his brother, I think killing his brother would probably push him a little too into the deep end to get pulled out. But I also don't want to underestimate the power of like Padme's love for him that it has. I do think it wouldn't be impossible for her to bring him out. Like, that is an interesting theory as well. I just almost feel like if I were to imagine it, I would be like, oh man, he's too far gone. She already tried once, and now he's killed somebody who practically raised him. But yeah, who knows? He's pretty dramatic. I feel like he could go lots of ways with his emotions.
And I just because you said the power of love, I have a Huey Lewis playing in my head, and it's like it's awesome.
Totally.
Actually. JKev?
So I think about all these scenarios, and I think about what she did actually say. She said, run away with me. Want to go back to Naboo and raise the kid or somewhere else. At that point, she had tried a couple of different ways, and she already saw the aftermath of him killing, not just the men, but the women and children too. And that wasn't enough of a red flag for her to run away. So I think she's kind of like attached to this sort of abusive guy, even though he had
more life choices all around. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm imagining, I'm a dad. I have 5 kids, and 3 of them are young girls. And I think about if Anakin had turned back, to the good side, and they ran away and raised Leia, you would see the dark side in him again whenever some boy did Leia wrong. Like, you think he went after Rush Clovis hard. I mean, dude, it hurts my daughter. Dark side's coming out. So, yeah. That's but that would be interesting. And I think one thing that Star Wars probably will never do, but would be, I think, really fascinating, is if there was like a what if series, like what we're about to have with the MCU on Disney Plus. So those animated, what if stories, I'm really looking forward to those. And I know in comics we've had that for a long time with parallel universes and things. But I would love to see that explored by somebody, official, just for fun, maybe an animated show, but obviously not canon. It would all be legends. But.
Yeah. And so that's one thing is I really wish that Legends would continue as a separate thing, but I want it to continue, Not everything we get needs to be canon, in my opinion. But no, awesome. Thank you so much for the feedback. Not gonna lie, Travis, you kind of broke me with yeah, she's not gonna forgive that. And then so it leads me to believe that she would go off and raise them and use her influence to try and gather Jedi texts and stuff and let them learn that Anakin probably would still be Vader at the beck and call, but at least Luke and Leia would have faced them together in that scenario. So that'd be
I
cool.
want to see Luke and Leia as teenagers, like talking back to Anakin. Like they all try to force choke each other. I don't know how that would work. It would be very dysfunctional, but
Actually, after what you said, is I'm picturing like all of Leia's boyfriends at some point had some weird experience of being choked.
Yeah, exactly. It suddenly just stops coming around. This is the 13th one. Yeah. Don't
Every
go
time
out
I
back.
come around, something flies off the wall and hits me. Like,
Right.
it's weird. Like, I
Yeah, exactly.
don't know.
That'd be
Shouldn't have
very
kissed his sister. Oh, wait.
Travis, did you get a chance to look around and kind of pick out a what if scenario?
Oh yeah.
Or make up your own?
There was one I had in mind last night that was interesting to me, and then I looked at the email, and I mean, it is a little bit TLDR, but I scanned it. I actually picked like 3 at random, and then I started actually reading it, and there was some interesting ones. So, without further ado, okay, one that I really liked was, what if Luke and Leia were raised together, which is kind of a little bit like what we were just talking about. And I haven't really given it that much thought, but it would be really interesting. And I think we might be getting a story similar to that in the future if they go with like Rey being pregnant with twins. There's, some people think that that's where it's heading, because twins kind of are recurring thing. And
if she had twins and named them Jason and Jaina,
yeah, that would be beautiful. But the rumor that I heard is those are not the names. But yeah, Kira, I think it's Kira and Zane.
Kira is an obvious choice. That was Rey's original name in Lucas's old script. But yeah, I mean, what do you think play out the scenario? How do you think that would have been different?
Well, I guess it would imply that they were both taken to Alderaan, and so Luke and Leia living on Alderaan, they would both be royalty. And I mean, Luke, he might be like a spoiled brat, like Leia was a little bit like a spoiled brat, at least from Han's perspective. But I think that was a misunderstanding on his part. But I think Luke would have actually been a spoiled brat.
He's a whiny little punk. I can.
Yeah.
I want the power converters now. Yeah.
It's like Mike TV or whatever.
Yeah. But I mean, that's not giving so much credit to what's his name? Jimmy Smith's Bail Organa. Yeah. Bail Organa. Like him and his wife, they may have been great parents and raised them right, and he may have had a lot to teach Luke. And maybe knowing where they came from, Bail Organa may have had a lot of wisdom to share with him, kind of nurturing and hopefully priming him for some sort of future of being a very important future. And maybe he would have eventually got him in touch with Yoda or some other Jedi to train him. So it may not have turned out so differently. I don't know. It's hard to say.
That's interesting. Well, sorry. I'll go to Shaylee first.
This scenario kind of excites me because I loved in Rebels when we got to see Leia helping the rebellion. So I feel like that let's say that they did take them both to Alderaan instead of both of them to Tatooine, that would have been an unstoppable. I would have loved that dynamic of having them both like working together in the rebellion and stuff. They would have been great. So that's immediately where my brain goes. I'm like, Rebels, they would have been so good for the rebellion because she did so much. Like, oh, that makes me really want that. But also maybe like more even of a team dynamic between them and the original trilogy too, you know? Like more of a
Maybe
equal
less
playing
kissing.
field.
Yeah.
A lot less kissing. Thankfully. Can we retcon?
That
To be
reminds me
clear, some, but just less.
Oh no.
No, like on a cheek or something, because there were a couple of
Yeah.
those. But there are 4 kisses on film between the two of them.
No, it's true.
Not that I've counted.
I was just
there's 4.
laughing at the.
I didn't know that.
Well, my cousin, I was talking to him earlier, Sean, and he was like, what if Leia fell madly in love with Luke in the first movie?
And we're gonna stop you there. JKev, your thoughts?
All right. Not that
Well,
kind of channel? Okay.
That was my reaction.
Yeah. They stopped that before it got too weird, I think. Because, I mean, a lot of people don't understand because, especially all of you that grew up and the originals were already there. And then this other generation that's even younger that, like, all 6 of the films were there. And so they just grew up, you know, sort of with those. That the original trilogy wasn't like this master plan that had every detail out of it. Most movies don't go that way anyway. But there were some things that, you know, changed along the way. Originally, George Lucas said he didn't want the Death Star until episode 6. Like that was always the plan to have it in return. It wasn't like, oh, I ran out of ideas. He just decided, okay, if I'm only going to get to do one movie, let's throw the Death Star in A New Hope. So, I mean, there's things like that. I only get that from the DVD commentaries, which I'm still glad that I have. Ancient technology, I know. But back to this scenario. With
It's an older code.
Yeah, exactly. It still checks out. I'm thinking about Luke when he first, got away maybe from Dagobah after he found out Leia was his sister, and he's in the X-Wing and he's flying. He's like, wait a minute, she grew up where? And I grew up on Tatooine. Like, why did I get the shaft here?
So much.
Yeah. Like he had to work those things out, and he's just cursing Obi-Wan's ghost the whole time, right? Until he gets to the next scene. So
we farmed moisture.
Right. And like Rey, I didn't know there was this much green in all the galaxy. Like I can imagine Luke felt
and she's
that
a
way.
princess.
Right,
really?
exactly.
God
Which
damn.
I did a comparison between Rey and Leia's story, and there's actually a lot of parallels between their stories, but there's an opposite when it comes to that. Like Leia was a princess, but Rey was a slave. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, to me, my heart breaks for Rey. Like I love how they took her character. I know we're not talking about Rey right now, but like I just I don't know. I've got kids her age from The Force Awakens, and so I just think of her like I wanted to adopt her. Let's take care of this kid. But anyway, I know I'm an old man. I'll let you ask the next question.
Like, yeah, although it's not related to our topic. The thing that I found super weird in Rise of Skywalker is it was like, yeah, they still sold you to Unkar Plutt, but it was to protect you. But they got money.
What were the other
they
alternatives?
did get money.
Here, right? Yeah.
I don't know. That just makes me chuckle. No, I love that scenario because I made a video today talking about, at least in the post-Battle of Yavin Legends, Jaina Solo is my favorite character. She is awesome if you haven't read any of that stuff. And I love the concept of if they were raised together, they would kind of be Jason Solo and Jaina Solo, because they both have those, they carried on those personalities. And That would be dope.
Yeah.
I would for sure pay to see that. Yeah, I do think that that Luke would still be like the whiny. Luke would be the princess in that scenario, in my opinion. That's just me. But Shayla, you get a chance to pick out a what if?
Yes. Which one? I picked two. One of them I picked is already kind of similar to what we talked about the first time. But I like it. So it's from Diego Sanchez, 621. It's like, what if Obi-Wan didn't leave Anakin on Mustafar? And like in that scenario, I think it plays like pretty similarly to what we were talking about before. But like, so Obi-Wan still beat him, but he didn't leave him. Anakin was in no shape to like put up a fight. He had lost limbs and stuff. So it does make me wonder. Yeah, we have an Anakin McNugget left. So it does make me wonder if he had brought him back, if they could have had the chance to bring him back from the dark side in that scenario, because then they kind of would have had the upper hand, like to have time to talk to him and have Padme talk to him, reunite him with Padme, and all that. Like in that scenario, that act of compassion from Obi-Wan to bring him back, and then having the ability to actually talk to him without him being able to fight back, which sounds so messed up, but you know what I'm saying. I kind of feel like they could have brought him back in that scenario from the dark side.
That's cool. I missed that question altogether. But JKev, your thoughts?
I mean, I was thinking the opposite. Like, what if he actually did his job and finished him off? I know that's dark, but like Obi-Wan failed in a sense. Like he thought he went there to defend, the Republic, although that was gone, but like to defeat Anakin, and he just left him there to burn up. Like, first of all, that's horrible, but it's just like, what if he actually finished him off? Then he wouldn't have been able to defeat Palpatine when he did. So, spoiler if you haven't seen Return of the Jedi, but Darth Vader's Luke's father.
Yeah, my full-on rule is you get 2 weeks, and then you have no one to blame but yourself.
People are yelling at me about Rebels. Like, bruh, I haven't seen it. Like, sorry, it's been out a while. For a minute.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just trying to picture, because I've seen people like do art and stuff about like, oh, what would a light side Vader look like, and a light side, Palpatine looks like. I want to see. I haven't seen anyone do like, what would a light side Anakin post no limbs look like? Would he just be like a
not as scary as the Vader mask, probably?
Well, that's
I'm
actually
picturing,
what
go ahead.
that's where I was going with it. Is I think we've all probably seen the light side Vader art,
Yeah,
where it's like a white suit and everything, and that's what I picture happening. I mean, assuming he stays on the light side, because he's gonna need all of that machinery to stay alive. So then you just got a white Vader. You got the vanilla.
Yeah,
so I'm even starting to tear up.
Grievous, but with better jokes, right? So.
Well, I'm even starting to tear up because I'm legitimately picturing like 90s cartoon Professor Xavier in the chair. Ooh. Right?
Oh,
but
wow.
It's Anakin. He just kind of like burned up. And then when he fights, he just kind of has lightsabers like floating around him, like Kreia,
or like Ahsoka did when she cut that hole. Yeah, in the last, what was it? Last.
Oh yeah.
War 7. Yeah,
had to spin around.
I was just like, wow, that was amazing.
Or would he be like Rayman, where he just has floating hands and feet?
Oh, you said Rayman, and I heard Rain Man.
Yeah, I was thinking
two very different
drivers.
I don't know if anybody's familiar with Rayman, but it was like an old video game where it's like this like a head and like a teardrop body, and it was like this like cute character, but his hands were like floating. He had no arms; they were just floating gloves.
Yeah, it's like the Wii characters that you make for yourself.
Yeah, and like
The memes.
feet, so like his limbs were invisible. So I was thinking like Anakin could be kind of like that guy.
But to Padme's credit, I think she'd stick with him in that scenario. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. JKev, I want to hear if you have a scenario.
So many great questions submitted. I'm going to take one that's not quite story. It's from Forrest Morse 12, and the question was, "What if Star Wars didn't exist?"
I saw that one and I was like, ooh.
And I can tell you there are several things that would be different. I don't know that it would be exactly like it was in the 1970s, but it would at least be different. We would still probably have movies that had 5 minutes of credits at the beginning. A lot of the technology that even exists outside of the movie industry, but particularly within it, the film business, wouldn't exist, or it would be vastly different, because George Lucas pioneered so many things, and the ILM team and everybody else, so many different new techniques, so many amazing things. Like, one of the things people griped about the prequels in my generation was too much CGI. Well, CGI was still pretty new at the time. And
They
it was freaking
invented
amazing.
it. They invented
Well, right.
it in that movie.
So much of it was invented for those movies, right? Yeah. And so it was, and to hear him talk about it at the time, like he's pioneering new technology, just like he did back in the day. There's just so much pop culture, so much of just sci-fi, but way beyond, is really owes it, like, he's the granddad of all that stuff, or like the godfather of so much of our culture. And it's, the iconic villains and everybody, the characters that he came up with have been a part of our culture. It would just be really different. I don't know if I would like it. Like, we would all be wearing Star Trek shirts. Just kidding. I like Star Trek too, but it just hasn't had the recent life like Star Wars has, for sure. And it's just amazing.
Well, I mean, Star Trek itself got canceled and it was renewed after Star Wars came out, and people were like, "Oh, you guys like space and stuff? Yeah, let's do more of that." Yeah. That's interesting, because also Pixar wouldn't exist. I think I know that the top two influencers of social idioms have been William Shakespeare and The Simpsons. Actually beat William Shakespeare, but that was like 5 or 6 years ago. But Star Wars is well up on that list with how it has influenced our culture. So that'd be fascinating to see where we would be, or if movies and what we know to be possible would be several years behind what we've seen. You know what I mean?
I mean, imagine if 2001: A Space Odyssey was still like the pinnacle of sci-fi. Now, it was amazing for the day, and there's some visual things that are still amazing today, but like, that was, I just don't, if there wasn't somebody like George Lucas who came along and took it even further, I just don't know what it would look like. Yeah. Maybe we'd be back to silent movies. I don't know. That's kind of what I'm picturing now.
Especially after watching like the behind the scenes for the original trilogy, and how much George Lucas fought to let these studios let him do these things. Man, I think we'd be 20 years behind where we are right now. At least.
Yeah, people complain about the business, but the business is, I think, vastly better because of him, and the fact that there are other ways to fund your films now than just a boardroom of old dudes that don't know what they're doing, except for writing checks, right? Although if they want to write me one, I'll take it, but depends on what they want me to make. But it'd be very different. The world would be very different.
Yeah. Travis, what do you think? Would you exist if Star Wars weren't here? Would we be friends? I don't know.
What would you consume for breakfast?
I hope so.
Interesting.
I know I would exist because my parents weren't exactly Star Wars fans when I was created. But I don't know. Like, Star Wars in a lot of ways has kept me around. So, you know, maybe I wouldn't be here. But what I think is you guys are saying, I think I'm the opposite. You know, if Star Wars didn't exist, or if George Lucas didn't create it, I think there would be a void, like a vacuum that would have been filled. Like something would have come about, maybe not in 1977, but maybe 1980. It would be a short time before someone else was innovative, like James Cameron, for example. There's a lot of directors that were already well on their way towards who they were becoming in the 80s. And there's no doubt about what George Lucas did in reinventing filmmaking and revolutionizing technology and everything. I mean, there's no question of that. But I feel like somebody or a collective of people would have resulted, you know, in something similar. We'd be in an alternate universe, but it would be similar in a lot of ways. And, you know, because I just go back to the principle of like the evolution of technology, where if you go back to the invention of the light bulb, you have Thomas Edison and you have Nikola Tesla, and they were both developing these technologies and at the same time not even knowing each other's work. And they would have invented the light bulb. You know, somebody was going to invent the light bulb. So there's a groundwork of technology, and in Hollywood there was this building of, there was an evolution towards where we are today, towards where Star Wars evolved from, that I think something would have happened similar to Star Wars.
Okay, I do like that. It actually makes me think of the Marvel comic universe, where there are certain planets or alternate universes where, what if man evolved from wolves instead of, and that's where like some old Wolverine content and like and Sabretooth and all that stuff came from. Is like, it's funny, but that's what kind of what it made me think of.
And a pig just walks up and says, "It can get weirder." That's what I'm imagining.
Shaylo?
So actually, my senior year of high school, I was taking like English 1101, which is like the first college English class. And for my final research paper, I wrote a paper called The Cultural Impact of Star Wars. So I just pulled it up, and it actually does. I did talk a lot about the CGI and stuff was like very revolutionary for its time. And I like the Phantom Menace, I have that it was 90% of the backgrounds were CGI, which is unheard of in other movies. So yeah, the technology was very ahead of its time. And then another big thing about Star Wars was actually kind of personal for me, is Princess Leia, because there was a big she was about the time the big feminist movement was happening, and like it was just representation of a powerful female lead in a sci-fi movie who wasn't just like a damsel in distress and there to be eye candy, even though she was kind of at some points, but it was still for its time, like,
hey, women can do whatever they want. They can be both if they want.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So, but yeah, so her character was very, very not common at the time. And
She was a different kind of princess for sure.
Yeah, it was very.
Someone's got to save our skins. And she just starts blasting people, and you're like,
got us in here. Did you have a plan for getting us out? Yeah.
Aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper?
Right. Yeah.
They go to rescue her. She insults them immediately. It's awesome.
Yeah, so like even if there were female leads, they're very, so the thing is like they're very easy to swallow for a lot of men, like easy to be okay with. But she pushed men out of their comfort zones and was very sassy, like y'all were saying, and very out there. So like she was a big deal for like film and female representation. So that's one thing that we would definitely be missing. That may have been set back a little bit if Star Wars hadn't been a thing. And then I also have like fun stuff on here. Like there was people made like an actual like people actually practice a Star Wars religion. Like that's a thing. Like people made a religion out of it. So the cultural
you guys
impact.
aren't part of it? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we all
You
are.
guys aren't.
So like the cultural impact is very obvious. Things like that. There's so many things culturally and technology and yeah.
Yeah, that's an awesome point because she absolutely was a feminist icon and like was the ultimate princess, right? I mean, people don't realize like who her parents was. She was literally a princess. And if you haven't read The Princess Diarist, please read it. It's such a good read.
Carrie Fisher.
I love Carrie Fisher. Yeah. And I got the audio version where it's her herself talking about it, and
I want that.
it's incredible. I've mentioned this before in a previous episode, but Travis was there with me in 2015 at the Star Wars Celebration when they were talking about The Force Awakens, where the trailer was released. We were at that Star Wars Celebration, and we went to the Carrie Fisher panel and had her talking about it. And we watched her make out with a random dude with a neck beard in the audience. It was super weird. But
Iconic.
she was so freaking cool. Anyways, moving forward, I had picked a second one, and I thought about what if, and I don't know what your guys' timelines are like, if we can always end sooner, but I thought of one of the questions was, what if you're watching Empire Strikes Back, and Vader is there and he's toying with Luke like he was there on Bespin, and he tells him, "No, I am your father. Join me, and we can rule the galaxy as father and son." And then Luke says, "Okay." How would that be different?
He would keep his arm, that's for sure.
Yeah.
We'd have one more arm.
He wouldn't lose.
I'm just thinking about Poe saying to him, you might want to rethink your technique. Like, maybe his ask just wasn't a good sell. I don't know.
He had just watched Glengarry Glen Ross and had that whole speech down, and he's like, but yeah, so if Luke had just joined up with Vader, how would that be different? And I think that Palpatine ultimately had the same plan. He was looking for a new vessel, and I think Luke might have become that vessel in that scenario. So I mean, obviously, two ways it plays out. Vader and Luke joined forces, overpower Palpatine, or Palpatine, being dope as he is, sees it coming and figures out a way to become the new vessel. Either way, the Force itself wants equilibrium. So what would the Force create in order to combat that, right? There's darkness and then the light rises to meet it. I think that in that scenario, we actually get Starkiller. We get the Force unleashed in the universe because someone that overpowered is what would be needed in that scenario. That's my thoughts of it. Because I think the Force is always going to try to reach equilibrium in any scenario.
I mean, that was a big part of Rey's explainer. Even though she was born from the dark side, she still wasn't dark ever. And, well, I mean, she did have her moments, but the reason why, like, Anakin's or Luke's saber called out to her, and why the Force, like, why there was just so much pushing her in that direction, was the Force trying to balance itself out, right? So I love her character, but
so do I.
I'll save that for another one.
Yeah. I can't wait. Like, I want to keep making these podcasts and then every other one, like the next one will be all about Phantom Menace, and we'll do like a side thing, and then the next movie keep going. But I can't wait until I can have you, JKev, on the Force Awakens. That's gonna be good.
Yeah, awesome.
But Travis, what do you think?
If Luke joined Vader, I think that would be a very interesting scenario, because if he's joining the dark side, then he's going to be tapping into the dark side. What is a source of his darkness could be his hatred for Vader. So I think that rather than them overthrowing the Emperor, I mean, which is also a possibility, I think the Emperor would exploit that and pin them against each other, and so that Luke would end up destroying Vader. And at that point, from what I understand, Palpatine did not have the ability to force do what he did in the
Essence transfer, yeah.
Rise of Skywalker. You know, the conduit, like, well, like sucking the Force energy from people. He didn't have that ability yet, but so I just think he would have tried to keep the rule of two alive, in that, you know, getting Luke to kill Vader, or one of them to kill the other. Just feeding that hate. And then, like you said, someone would rise up for the light side. Could be Starkiller, but I think it would be more readily Leia. And she would...
There's another.
I mean, it would be difficult for her to balance that, like her being a general for the rebellion and train as a Jedi, but it's possible. I mean, I think she had a lot more latent Force power and potential than she ever was able to see through, you know.
Absolutely. Actually, in the book, From a Certain Point of View, there is one of the stories, and I feel like I mention this book all the time. I don't recommend people read it because a lot of it is garbage. But there's a story where Obi-Wan, as a Force ghost, is appearing to Yoda for the first time, and they're talking, and he's like, you know, it's right after Obi-Wan died and figured out how to corporealize his body, and he's like, you know, Skywalker's going to be coming to you soon, and he's talking about it, and Yoda's like, awesome, so Leia's going to be here, and I'm going to get to train her, and he's like, oh no, the other one, and he's like, you mean like the emotionally like unstable one, the one that's exactly like his father that got us in this mess? Like, Yoda was hoping for Leia to be the one, and I don't know. I just find that fascinating. You know, it kind of goes along with what you're saying. But Shaylee, what do you think?
Yeah, I was kind of in the same place where, like, when this question was asked, my immediate thought was like, well, then it becomes a story of, I think Leia would rise up and be the one to try to bring Luke back. Like, I think she would try to, yeah, she would definitely, that just, like, I've talked about Leia a lot this episode, but that would just be such a fun, like you were saying how you wish you could see, like, parallel or different universes, like different what ifs, but like actual cartoons of it or whatever, like they're doing in MCU. I would love to see that, where it's like if Luke did turn to the dark side, then the story shifts to Leia being the one who needs to become, you know, a Jedi and train, and then go bring Luke back to the light side. So it's just like everybody going to bring each other back. But yeah, that I would love. That would definitely, my brain was like, that becomes the story of Leia having to rescue Luke from the dark side. Then she would do it.
Yeah,
she loved him.
I'm picturing like that, the scene from Jedi, but it's Leia, and then Vader's like, "Oh, your brother," and then but she's even tempered and smart, and like has had schooling, and yeah, I don't think that would be fair, to be honest. I think Leia would be it.
Well,
JKev?
eventually in the Legends, you have Luke going to the dark side temporarily. That's a little bit farther down the road, and I forget who it was that brought him back.
It was Leia. It was Leia that
It
brought
was
him
Leia.
back.
Okay. Yeah, so it would be really cool to see if Lucasfilm ever, toys with those possibilities. I mean, who knows?
In a sense, they had that with Ray and Ben, right? Like they didn't know each other, but then they certainly got to know each other. Not even their will to know each other. She's like, "Can you put on a cowl or something?" They didn't, want to be connected that way, or at least she didn't at first. But then
I'm thinking of the shirt.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
You're gonna no. So it just to see that dynamic play out was interesting. But if they had grown up together, would be, of course, it'd be even weirder, if they ended up as a couple. But not blood related, no matter what people say, misunderstanding the comics and all that with Anakin and Palpatine. But I'm thinking of beyond the movies, like behind the scenes. Everything we talked about with Leia being like this icon is so important. But I think if they had pushed to make her the Jedi, like what we're seeing with Rey, the backlash would have been even worse than it is now. Because at least now I think there's some more awakened people that don't see this as such a big deal. Like, in fact, it is a big deal, but the other way, like, it's great that we have strong female characters, but some are triggered by that. And I always say, you got to think about why that triggers you. It's not the character, perhaps, but to have Leia do that, I think maybe that might have killed Star Wars even faster.
True.
Than it seemed to be going.
And
for a
now
while.
I'm sad.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
Humanity
sucks. Yeah, I mean, I'm just the arguments that I have with, especially, it seems like children, like little boys, that are so bothered by even having a female Jedi in the first place. Although they're like, but Ahsoka, and I'm like, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of scenarios where I can say that doesn't prove that you're not biased. That you happen to like this character that is the most thoroughly developed character maybe in all of canon, even maybe rivaling Anakin in some ways, right? Like, sure, we know her really well, we're gonna love her. I think she's awesome, but like, I don't know, they
hated her when she came out.
Yes, I was there
she was
too.
the most hated
saw it in the theater
I've ever seen,
and people, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Interesting alien sort of Jedi Padawan here, and then to hear people
Sky Guy,
right? Yeah, Sky Guy and Snips. I'm like, where did that come from? But like the love for the series, but there was so much hate for the movie, and like the first season of the series was not well received by the fans at the time, and yet I think Ahsoka has helped to bring it even further. And so I think once people kind of get over the Rey hate, it will be even better, and maybe it'll be just normal to have women who are the superheroes, people of color who are the superheroes, not just a white dude that always is the hero. Like that still, like, I don't know. I think about, speaking of the diversity angle here, when I look back at the Phantom Menace, because I did a whole series on it recently, and I just was really thinking through like Amidala's outfits and how amazing they were. But I know that some of the criticism was they were very Asian, but she's not. And I was thinking, well, they missed an opportunity. Oh, wait, no, Luke and Leia were already white, so they couldn't really do that unless, yeah. So I get why they made Amidala the way they did, and I thought the outfits and everything were great, but I want to see more diversity, and of course Disney Lucasfilm is giving us that. Marvel is starting to give us that, and I just, my kids are biracial, and I want them to see heroes that they think they can look up to. Like the Shang-Chi movie is going to be awesome if it ever comes out. On the Marvel side of things, like they're also into Kung Fu and they're half Chinese, and so there's a lot of things that it's like, hey, a hero for us. But I just, to see, but then going back to end the story in the universe, Luke and Leia as a sibling rivalry, like fighting each other, would have been pretty fantastic, I'm thinking in my head. And I'm just imagining, though, a scenario playing out where it's like Luke saying, have you come to save my soul? And she says, no, just like in The Last Jedi, right? Like, because I could see her assassin that way. Yeah. I mean, she could have tried, and then if at the end of the day he's not going to do it, she's just going to have to end him. Like, I don't think she would have stopped like Obi-Wan did, but that's just me.
Right.
I don't know. I'm just playing these scenarios out in my head.
That's what I was saying. I was saying the same exact thing. Like, if Leia had have gone and been trained, Luke was like, "Oh, I see the good in you." I don't think Leia would have said the same thing. I'm like, you know what?
To Anakin, yeah,
yeah. There is good, but
this is like your father.
You got to be held accountable for your crimes, and right. Especially if you read like Bloodlines and stuff. Like, she actually never got the chance to come to terms with all that stuff with her father torturing her.
Right. Yeah, exactly. In a sense, she did with Ben, though, because I think once she got older and she got to see it in her son, not her father, and she literally gave her last breath to save him from Vader's fate, which a lot of people don't know, and I need to do a video on this maybe someday soon. If you've seen the commentary, not the commentary, the what do you call that? The documentary for the Rise of Skywalker. One of the filmmakers talks about how Leia's reaching out to Ben and saving him was her Jedi trial, and that she did complete her Jedi journey as she was dying, which is kind of just a sweet moment. I wish they could have pointed that out in the film, but I do just love knowing that, and she didn't give up on him. But a young Leia, she would have just totally wiped the floor with Vader.
All right. Well, so I don't want this to go too long, but I do want to do one last same scenario for everyone, right? Rise of Skywalker, same movie that it was, but at the end, Ben doesn't die. Travis, go. I know I'm just springing this on you, but you can think on your feet. I believe in you.
Okay. I was hoping to bring up one of my own about Mace Windu not falling out of a window, but I'll go with this. If Ben hadn't died, I don't think they would have lived happily ever after as a couple. I think that would have been a little more complicated. There was a kiss. There was a kiss, and there's something there, but it would have probably been more
Stockholm syndrome.
I think they would have started a Jedi Order, and maybe a romance could have grown out of that cooperation. It's a nice thought, but I kind of, and I really do wish he kind of could have lived, because he didn't really have much to do in the Rise of Skywalker as far as dialogue, and right when you get to see Ben and how awesome he is as a character, he dies, and it's just like, man, I wish he could have lived for a little bit longer. So I don't know. He
had one line, "Ow."
Yeah.
That's all his line has been.
Ow.
Shaylo, what do you think? Ben survives. What happens?
So this scenario is Ben survives, but this scenario is that they're both surviving?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, they definitely, I feel like I want to try to not be biased, because I have been a Raylo shipper since 2015. I'm sorry. So
it's okay. You do you. We don't all have to agree to love each other and get along.
I love them. But so I do believe they would have started some sort of Jedi Order together. I'm not so sure Ben would have been as good at it as Rey, because he seems a little less stable. But yeah, I definitely, that would have been, that's one of those things where it's like the story hasn't been written like to that point yet. So it's like the possibilities. I definitely could see them starting some sort of like Jedi Order together, but not really like Jedi. It would definitely be different. It would be more balanced, obviously. But yeah, that's all I can think of, is that they would start an order and start to train new people. But Rey would definitely be the head of that.
Absolutely. And they'd have to have a separate hut for Kylo Ren to go and throw his little fits and stuff, like, so that people wouldn't see it. Like,
but then there's also, what you have to think about is, like, what a lot of people bring up. He did do a lot of bad stuff. So, like, as much as I, like, in my head, I'm like, oh, they would start a new order together and it would be great. They may put him in, like, jail or something, because, like, he did a lot of bad stuff. So that's also a possibility. I love Ben, obviously, but he did do a lot of bad stuff. So maybe he wouldn't have anything to do with the new order.
yeah, absolutely.
But in my head, I would like to think so. My head canon.
JKev?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of thinking about this scenario, and if somehow he didn't have to sacrifice himself to save Rey, which I thought was a beautiful moment. I thought, this, in a way, Ben's redemption arc is a lot more developed than Vader's was, because Vader was just like, no, yeet, right? Like, that's kind of what happened. Although now that we can analyze it from decades, since, we can kind of see some moments where he is starting, like, Vader actually goes from being absolutely evil to starting to question things, and you can kind of see it where there is conflict. Luke could sense it in him. Kylo had the opposite. He had gone from completely conflicted when he finally killed his father and lost that fight, largely from that as much as the bowcaster, I think.
You're right. That is canon. Just real quick, in the novelization, he finds himself weaker after killing his father.
Right. So yeah, there's a lot of symbolism going on there. He's scarred physically. He's completely, like, broken, but he's also scarred internally. Like, there's just a lot of scarring going on with that guy, or fresh wound rather at that point. But by the time you get to the Rise of Skywalker, he's a lot calmer. I mean, after Mustafar, but because he really lets him rage out there. But he's just not quite as a fit of rage monster, like at the drop of a hat. He's just very resolute. He's pure evil at that point. But
it's like he's not trying to convince himself anymore.
Right. He finally, like, he had the mantle, he assumed it, of the supreme leader by then. And then he gets to this point where he almost dies, and he's just kind of dumbfounded. And, his mom reached out to him, and Rey's there, and she heals him. And that, you could see that transformation when he's there talking to the memory, like, in his head. I think a lot of people still don't understand that. Anyway, we'll talk about that when we get to those movies. But to see him totally give himself to her and to save her, like, to me, that was an awesome redemption arc. But let's say he didn't have to give it all up, which is the scenario. I don't see him showing up at resistance meetings and New Republic meetings saying, hey guys, I'm sorry I killed all your friends, but I'm here to help. Yeah, okay, janitorial duty. Finn's like, you're going to clean up. So I think they would have had to been secret, like Anakin and Padme, in a sense. Like, he would have had to, like, for instance, a lot of people don't think about yet that nobody's left alive that knows that Rey is a Palpatine. And I don't know how long she's going to hide that, but she's going to have some explaining to do at some point. That's got to be part of it. How would she have, said, oh, okay, but no, Ben's good now? Like, ooh, that would have been rough.
Yeah.
But she would also said, you know what you are? You're difficult too. You're a monster. Like, that's the way their dialogue would go sometimes.
Yeah, I gotta agree with JKev here, because I imagine, him surviving, coming back with him to base, and everyone else is like, like, he's here? Like, really? Like, this mother? Didn't he, especially Finn, like, that guy put a lightsaber in my spine once.
Which I still don't understand how he survived that, but go on.
he scored him. He didn't cut through him. It's but because I've seen this question posed a lot, and it does take into consideration what happens at the very end of the film. So that's why I thought it'd be a good one. And it is just, to me, the most awkward situation ever, because I apologize, I'm not a Raylo shipper myself.
I totally get it. That is a valid thing to not ship.
I think if their relationship would be, man, how do I explain this? It would be 50 Shades of Grey-ish, which is to say, like, spicy but not healthy.
Wow.
Like poisonous.
So we're going into the fan fiction now, or no?
No.
I had
Next
someone
episode.
send me some. Anyways, it was not to my liking. Let's just say. And I think what we got from Force Awakens is Finn was very much into her and was deeply connected to her, through the Force.
Ray, I gotta tell you something.
And
and
literally, literally, Finn was like the first person to think that she was special. He was the first person to recognize her as an individual, and he's been supportive, never controlling, never evil or any of this stuff. And
she is like the first girl he ever saw, though.
There were
well, Phasma, but yeah, but probably never without the chrome on, right? I don't know.
Anyways, no, but that being said, it would have been super awkward for everyone. Would it have worked? It might have. I don't know, but let's be honest. Han, his father, was that handsome, charismatic, daring sort. It didn't work with Leia because he's not someone that's going to stop and hang around. I don't know. It would have been really cool to see, but the other thing is, in order to become a Force ghost, you do have to, your death has to be in an act of selflessness. And I think had there not been such a big catalyst for it, I don't see him doing that. He did sacrifice himself for Rey because she had already done that to him. B, he had turned back to the light, right? He has the exact opposite journey as Vader. The darkness claimed him from birth, right? That's canon. The whole reason that he trained with Luke wasn't that Luke was going to be the best to train him. Remember, Leia trained herself as well, but he trained with Luke because he was surrounded by darkness. Leia sent him to Luke to learn balance, and it got worse. So, I don't know. I think that he would have eventually returned to the light. It would be easier to answer my own question had he had any dialogue other than "ouch" after turning. One thing I think about a lot, probably too much, is from Rey's perspective. If you're in Rey's mind, she fights Palpatine and she dies. She wakes up and Ben's holding her. Without saying a word, he kisses her. And then he dies. I imagine she's like, the hell is happening?
I can't keep up.
Yeah, it's almost Romeo and Juliet at that point.
The way I saw it, she kissed him.
She kissed him back. She was dead. I felt he was the instigator. I don't know.
No. He brought her back to life, and then she kissed him.
Okay, I'll have to rewatch him. But yeah, it'd be super awkward. I guess that's my final answer.
I think she had some sort of like spiritual understanding. Like she understood that he brought her back to life, and there was something on a deep level that she just knew that it wasn't Kylo Ren.
And that comes from The Last Jedi, right? They both saw visions of each other joining them, and both of those visions happened. For Kylo Ren,
I thought the movies weren't planned out. Sorry. They're not connected.
And what's funny is, as someone that has read almost all of canon, the connections are all there. Everything that happens in Rise of Skywalker is actually very heavily hinted at in the Aftermath trilogy, which ended 3 years ago, something like that. I don't know. It's all funny to me, but yeah, I do love the direction that we ended up getting. His sacrifice was beautiful, and also I want to see the Force Ghost meeting of him and Anakin. Yeah, it's wonderful.
So I want to throw out another scenario that I still think is actually plausible. We know, he Force ghosted. At least we saw him, die the same way we saw, Obi-Wan, sort of Yoda, Anakin, but he also gave himself completely to her. And I just wonder with the dyad, and we still don't know a lot about the dyad, like maybe he doesn't even have to appear as a Force ghost. Maybe they've got some kind of internal monologue going on, or dialogue rather, because of that connection. Like in a sense, he still lives on in her. And I wonder where that's going to go in the future.
Absolutely.
It's kind of easy to hide him that way, right? As long as she doesn't talk to him out loud in front of people.
Yeah.
But I think that's how she can rightfully be called a Skywalker, because his life force was given to her, and so now she's kind of like truly a Skywalker. Like she has Skywalker blood flowing through her veins in a way.
Skywalker life force, yeah. And not only that, but I mean, Force Awakens, Maz Kanata goes up to her and says, "What you seek is in front of you, not
behind you." Yep.
What was she seeking?
The belonging you seek, yeah.
It's beautiful.
And then Rey rejects it and the lightsaber right away, but she had no hero's journey. But tongue in cheek, obviously she did.
Oh,
Ohana
I love
means
the
family.
hero's journey and Rey through the hero's journey.
Yes. Well, but yeah, thank you guys so much for joining me on this on this podcast. I'm stoked. All of your insights are awesome, and I love how all of us are very different, have different perspectives on things, and we can all get along, and it's just beautiful. So thank you so much.
That's the way it should be. This is the way.
Yes.
This is the way.
Let's go around and say where we can find. I know I met half of you through TikTok. I've known Travis since I was like 13 or something. But,
forever.
Yeah, where can we find you online, and in the event that TikTok gets banned, where are you? Travis?
I'm not on TikTok. I don't think. I'm here. You can find me here on this channel, maybe more than once a month, and that's probably the main place. I also have a SoundCloud with my original music under The Time Traveler, spelt with one L, The Time Traveler. And
I'll put all links in the YouTube description.
And Instagram is The Time Trav.
And Shaylee?
It's pretty much just TikTok. Shaylo Ren, Shaylo_Ren. But in the event that gets I guess Instagram. I don't really have any intentions of being anywhere else. So Instagram is Shaylee Stafford.
Okay.
That's about it.
All right. JKev?
So I joined Dub Smash today. Yeah, so it looks like a sort of a discount TikTok at this point, but no offense,
It
Dub Smash.
predates.
Well, right,
I
right.
have a Dub Smash myself.
Yeah, it's the first time I actually went on it, but I listen. I don't think the TikTok thing is going to happen. The ban, which I did a
Agreed.
post about, working in government IT as I do. I don't think it's going to happen. But if it does, what little tiny influence I have is going to be loud, and you might see me on my socials, or you may never see me again. Who knows? But I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, lots of different social networks, all JKev Parker. So that's where I'm at. Let's see what else. YouTube. I've got one YouTube video on my personal channel, and I plan to do a lot more of those. So I'm really excited to be part of this, because now maybe some people will recognize me with the famous Brandon. So
famous, yeah. We'll see. Yep. And then me, I'm Brandon McKinney, also known as Darth Choco or Darth Chocolate. Darth Chocolate 7 on PSN. I will put everyone's links down in the descriptions below. If anything happens, if you look up Darth Chocolate, I will try to make myself available. I also own darthchocolate.com, so I'll put my links there. So thank you guys so much, and may the force be with you always.
May the force be with you.
with you as well. Thank you.